What did you do major in at Iowa State?
Yeah, I started in animal science kind of with that plan, but actually on my dad's recommendation, I went and met Dr. Beitz pretty early.
Oh my gosh.
And I tell people this story a lot. My very first time meeting with him, he tells me, and get this, I'm like a month into undergrad, right? And he's like, well, you're going to want to go to grad school. And I'm like, okay, well, why would I want to go to grad school? This is not in my plans at all. And he's like, well, you know, you're going to get to the end of 4 years and you're just going to figure out there's a lot more to learn.
Oh my gosh.
And he was right.
Hello everybody, this is the Dairy Digressions podcast. I am Matt Lucy and I will be your host. We're recording from the beautiful city of St. Louis, the gateway to the American West, where members of the American Dairy Science Association Board of Directors, as well as editors of the Journal of Dairy Science and JDS Communications, are meeting to discuss our journals and the upcoming annual meetings. The ADSA annual meeting is the largest gathering of dairy researchers and dairy professionals worldwide. Don't miss your next opportunity to network and learn alongside so many people with expertise in both the production and processing of food for human consumption. And remember, ADSA membership supports all of the ADSA initiatives in the dairy sciences, including ADSA Discover conferences, and gets you huge discounts on publication fees and meeting registration. Today on the podcast, we have professor and dairy nutrition icon, Dr. Barry Bradford, who is the CE Meadows Endowed Chair in Dairy Management and Nutrition at Michigan State University. His laboratory aims to better understand the metabolic physiology of dairy cattle, to identify strategies that will improve the economic and environmental sustainability of dairy production. Specifically, the laboratory studies inflammation and immunity in the transition to lactation, the use of nutraceuticals to improve production and health in the livestock sector, and evidence-based dairy management. Prior to joining Michigan State University, Dr. Bradford spent 13 years at my alma mater, Kansas State University, as a professor of animal sciences and industry. He earned his bachelor's degree from Iowa State University, working with Dr. Don Beitz, before earning his PhD at Michigan State with Dr. Mike Allen, father of hepatic oxidation theory in dairy. Scopus lists 148 publications, nearly 4,000 citations, and an impressive index of 31. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you, Dr. Lucy.
Did I get it right? Is there anything incorrect in there?
That was spot on, 100%.
Spot on.
I'd expect nothing less from you.
So I've already figured out, we have a little outline we're going to go through with Barry. So he's born in Iowa. We figured that out early today when we're talking. Are you from a dairy? Sounds like you must be from a dairy.
No, I grew up actually on a seedstock beef operation.
Beef?
Yes.
Oh, no. Don't tell that to the dairy. No, don't tell people that, okay? For you people that don't know, don't worry. Beef lactate as well, okay? They're in the same species of kind, okay? But they just don't go through the parlor where they tear up the parlors, don't they, Barry?
They would.
They would.
Some of our cows would have.
Would have, that's right. So you decide you're out there in Iowa and you're out there in the range and you're riding your horse and you decide you're going to go to college or what? What was the story with that?
Yeah, well, I'm from a big family, and everybody in the family went to college. It was kind of an expectation, which is cool. But I was kind of planning to come back and join the operation when I was in high school. I was really involved. We sold bulls, so I got a lot of very early experience explaining to people what EPDs are, which is the beef equivalent of a PTA, right?
Yeah,
so
right,
a lot of good science training from early on.
So this was in high school, or when were you selling the bulls and stuff?
Yeah, especially in high school, I was very involved. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! So then you went to what did you do major in at Iowa State?
Yeah, I started in animal science kind of with that plan, but actually on my dad's recommendation, I went and met Dr. Beitz pretty early.
Oh my gosh.
And I tell people this story a lot. My very first time meeting with him, he tells me, and get this, I'm like a month into undergrad, right? And he's like, well, you're going to want to go to grad school. And I'm like, okay, well, why would I want to go to grad school? This is not in my plans at all. And he's like, well, you're going to get to the end of 4 years and you're just going to figure out there's a lot more to learn.
Oh my gosh.
And he was right.
You got to know that Dr. Beitz, and I think he may have recently retired. Maybe that's not true. I think
he's in the process now, just recently, yes.
Iconic sort of biochemistry, nutrition, physiology guy, I would say. We all love him.
Yep.
Because he's so darn smart, and so shout out to him.
Yep.
We got to get him on the podcast,
Should.
You should. He would be fantastic. So you're there, and let me guess, you're there, and you take your first dairy science class, and you're like, wow, my eyes are open. No? How did you get into the dairy sciences?
This is kind of embarrassing because I've taught a lot of dairy stuff now, but I never actually was a student in a dairy science class in my life.
What? Tweet. Okay. Hey, you kids out there, you don't need to take any dairy science to become Barry Bradford, okay? Wow. No way.
So, yeah, I was in a straight animal science program. They had dairy classes, but I wasn't in them. Beitz got me convinced to add a second major in ag biochemistry, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed that. But I didn't really get drawn into dairy until I started working in his lab my freshman year then. And at the end of that year, he said, well, we've got this study to do. If you don't have plans for the summer, why don't you stay here and run this study for us at the Iowa State Dairy? And so that was my first exposure. I was mixing diets in a cement mixer, to make little small batches of diets for cows, and I started to see what it looks like to be around a dairy.
That was your freshman year?
The entire county I grew up in, there was one dairy with like 50 cows or something. Yeah. I was not in the dairy area at all.
What did your dad say about you not coming home for the summer?
I don't think he was too pleased.
Thanks. Thanks, Don.
Yeah, right.
But he introduced you. Your dad introduced you.
He did.
Fair enough. So you're at Kansas State for a long time. I'll never forgive you for leaving there, okay? Tremendous amount of work. You were very successful at Kansas State.
It was a great place, yeah.
Yeah, and we both, I was there for a master's degree. Great town, great people. Great dairy. You had tremendous production. I remember that K-State dairy where you were there was rocking, right? Fair?
And frankly, yeah, you walk through that place and look at the infrastructure, and then you see the numbers, and you're like, this can't be from the same
cows.
Because frankly,
those cows make milk on the K-State dairy, I was there as well, and it was a very different time, Barry.
Yeah.
Okay, so
a couple years before.
A couple years before you were there, and you moved to Dave Beatty was in this position before you at Michigan State, and he's an old Florida guy. And Dave, shout out to Dave, he taught me dairy metabolism, longtime editor and stuff for the Journal of Dairy Science and everything else.
Yep.
And he took this position.
Yep.
And then when he retired, you moved up into this position.
Yep.
And the gentleman it's named after is Dr. Meadows.
Yep.
And he's apparently iconic up in Michigan, or this gentleman?
Absolutely, yeah. I had to do a little research when I applied for the role. He did his PhD with Jay Lush, who's the godfather of animal breeding. Yeah. So he went through Iowa State to get that degree, and right out of his PhD, he got hired at Michigan State and was there for like 30 years. And this is after serving in the Marines, either during World War II or right after.
Oh, wow.
And, the first thing everybody would tell you about him is that they could tell he was a Marine. There was a story I found, like, over his time in Extension and at Michigan State.
Yeah.
He claimed to have visited every single dairy in the state of Michigan.
Oh, fantastic.
Which at the time, I think was well over 3,000 farms.
Oh, my, yeah.
It was astounding, yeah. It had a huge impact.
I was reading about him. I guess in 1978, there was some sort of legislative thing about him or something like that.
It's still hanging on the wall in Anthony Hall.
I mean, who gets that sort of stuff? So I'm really glad you took that job. I mean, really, it was. I remember when I found out you took that. I said, "Oh yeah, that was the man that was clearly the guy to get that job." And I think you're 50. I think you're 50 research, 50 extension in that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And did you always want? Did you have any extension at Kansas State?
I did not. And actually, when I got hired there right out of my PhD, I would not have been qualified for an extension role probably. I mean, you can learn on the job, but I had learned a lot about dairy production, but I wasn't ready to give advice on things that are, like anything you do on a farm, it includes lots of facets. You can't only look at it as a nutritionist or whatever, right? And so I felt like in my time there, working with producers and then starting to try to figure out how to build a new dairy there, I learned so much about the holistic aspects of farm management. management. I feel more confident now.
Yeah, because now I think you get on all the major dairy programs and they want to hear, basically your story. And so, yeah, you're super, able to communicate in that manner. And then no teaching then.
Yeah, I teach a little bit, like a month a year is all. I kind of miss that, but you can't do everything. Right?
Yeah. So you have a lab. I saw your lab. They're called the Dairy Metabolism Group or something like that. Looks like you got a little mix. Some men, some women, little this, little that.
Yeah, it kind of swings back and forth over time. But
okay.
Yep.
Do you have so some of them are grad students. You have a technician.
So I'm really fortunate. I work with Dr. Lamont Mammadova for 17 years now. She moved with me from Kansas State. She's trained in biochemistry, and she's a senior research associate and does an awesome job helping mentor students.
Got some students, some postdocs probably. Got some postdocs?
I'm co-mentoring a postdoc with Dr. Vandehar.
Okay, okay. And you've got funding from all over the place. I think you've got USDA type of funding. There's probably some industry funding.
Yeah.
And you have some funding with your position.
Yeah, right. And so that's largely going to like program growth more so than like research specific projects. But Yep.
How do you ever run a lab? You're constantly on the road. You're always gone. How do you run a lab? Who runs your lab?
Well, we have weekly meetings that we commit to unless I absolutely can't attend. My graduate students learn to be patient.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Right?
They're good at helping each other. Yeah, we do the best we can, I guess.
What's your favorite day at work?
I think one thing I really like about this job is it's the variation, right? It's always something different. But a really good day would be in the morning I'm helping a producer solve a problem and they actually think an idea is worth trying.
Nice.
And they actually implement it.
Yeah.
And in the afternoon, we've got new data that we analyze, and I sit there and actually have a couple hours to sit with my grad student and try to take statistical output, try to make biological sense of it, and think about how that fits into what we know about science, right? That's I think that puzzle thing is, I think, one of my favorite things. And then if you combine that with mentoring a young person, it's hard to beat.
Yeah, it's a great career, if you if you kind of like problem solving and mentoring and I it is interesting. I'm sure we all feel the same way. There's nothing better than trying to help a guy on a farm who's trying to solve a problem and maybe implement something and there's a solution there.
I don't know about you, but I mean, some of our projects from conceptualization to actually finishing can be 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And it's just like you get so bogged down in the drudgery of doing the tasks. And then when you go out and somebody actually gets really excited about the insights, that's so reinvigorating.
It really makes you
want to go again for the next project.
And we're going to talk a little science now, okay?
Okay, I'm ready.
Ready?
Turn on the science hat.
Turn on the science hat. Okay, wear your thinking cap here, okay? Because you're talking to me, right? But before we do that, I just want to ask you, what do you think of the ADSA loyalty program? I bet you don't pay. You review so many papers and you submit so many papers, you probably don't pay for papers anymore.
So I'm an editor now. So I don't actually review a lot of papers other than the ones I'm handling as an editor, right?
So you're not able to take advantage of the program.
At the end of 2025, every paper I review from then on, I'm chugging in those loyalty points, man.
We're talking about the ADSA loyalty program here, and this is a Paul Kononoff initiative.
Yep.
Shout out to Paul, who's retiring.
Not from his job.
Not from his job. Yeah. Don't worry, UNL. He's not retiring from UNL, but he's retiring as editor-in-chief. It's already been 6 years for Paul. He'll be at the annual meeting. I'm assuming you'll be there too this year.
I'll be there.
Yeah. And then you guys at the annual meeting, you buy Paul a beer and thank him for all the work he did. And one of the things he did was he developed this loyalty program. So now, if you review for JDS, submit papers for JDS, you get credits, which you can apply for page charges and stuff like that. I mean, it's
what's
baby.
What's cool to see is not only is that a reward for doing a good job, right? It's what we learned this week is it's actually probably contributing to a decrease in time to get reviews in. Yeah. And so we're actually getting papers through the process of review and acceptance quicker now, which is everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah, so it's been a great thing. And so I just wanted to so this applies both to the journal Dairy Science as well as JDS Communications. So both journals, there's no discrimination here, okay? Both journals are on the program. Hey, I was a big fan of Mike Allen. I love Mike. He's slightly older than me, a little bit older, not too much older. I always loved it. Where are we at with hepatic oxidation theory? Because Mike had this hepatic oxidation theory. I know you must have worked on it as a graduate student.
Yep.
So I didn't see too much lately in your program about hepatic oxidation theory.
Right.
Can you just give the elevator speech on what it is and where it stands. Is it all done? All done? We know it. It's the Bible, or is there still work to be done?
Yeah, so this was the core focus of my PhD work. So the hepatic oxidation theory is the idea that the liver is actually one of a few very important anatomical sites for determining appetite. So basically the animal is seeing nutrients that come in. The liver is kind of the traffic cop of metabolism. So it can see nutrients demanded and acquired, and can send a signal to the brain that has a major impact on whether an animal decides to eat more or not.
Okay.
And the reason this has actually gotten a lot of traction, it's not completely egg-headery. It lines up with data we have from very applied studies, where if you just go from extremely fermentable starch sources like high moisture corn that's fermented, or steamed flake corn, to just finely ground corn that has similar digestibility, you can see huge changes in how much animals choose to eat. And in a dairy cow, it affects milk production. So,
wow.
And that's actually super relevant in Michigan, because we have a short growing season compared to a lot of the country.
Okay.
And so a lot of people would harvest corn before it was fully dried down.
Yeah.
Before it froze, right? And then
Yeah.
ensile it. So you end up with incredibly fermentable, very, very digestible starch. And basically Mike's work over 15, 20 years showed not only that people were better off having dry ground corn than this high moisture corn, but also this very complicated science to explain why. And it's very hard to get to the point where you can say, okay, this is totally proven. Okay, but it fits very well with field observations in many, many examples.
So it's solid. I think it's solid. People wouldn't, stand up and start yelling, "Oh, come on, it's bullcrap. No more of that stuff." They like it then. It is important, and I think for you listeners who are not nutritionists, there's a very strong correlation between dry matter intake and milk production. So
absolutely.
if cows don't eat, they're often milk. And so, you guys, you would show that, and I must have known, I must have been sitting in the audience. You must have been a grad student when I was watching those papers, and then I think I went on a trip to Brazil with Mike. I don't know, I might have, but it was absolutely crazy. And I did see that you had a symposium paper in the Journal of Dairy Science about this. This was in 2023. Was that essentially a summary of your PhD work, that symposium paper in 2023?
Well, sort of. We had a whole symposium basically to honor Dr. Allen's contributions in this space, and we had 4 talks and then symposia paper that aligned with those. And so overall, it's a really nice, bow on this area of work in Mike's career. What was fun for me is, you kind of mentioned, I hadn't kind of kept working on that since grad school. And some of that was frankly, that area of science is so complicated. So many things can influence appetite. And it makes it hard if you get a negative result. It makes it hard to say, nope, that is wrong, because there's so many caveats to it. So anyway, this is kind of the first time in 15 years I'd come back to it, and I found a lot of neat work that had been done in mice and other species that really started to help add additional detail and really still fits with this concept of the liver being central.
So just to remind our reviewers, the Journal of Dairy Science, as well as Dairies Communications, is 100% full open access. And you can, if you're interested in feed intake and dairy, which is still an important topic.
Of course. Yeah.
Still an important topic. This series of articles, which were published in March of 2023 in the Journal of Dairy Science, that would be an excellent primer to at least get started.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's one of the things another thing I think Paul also spearheaded. I think Paul spearheaded the move to open access as well. So there's 2 highly significant, there's been many, but there's 2 highly significant contributors to the effort. And he's done so many things. So anyways, and then what? Would you like to take one guess? Don't look at my thing. What is your most highly cited paper ever?
Probably a review on inflammation and transition.
You got it. With the most highly used figure ever, the cow on fire. Okay, so tell me. I always have to put that up. Okay, I show it to my freshmen in my class. Okay, the cow is not on fire. Okay, everybody be okay.
No cow was harmed in the making of this image.
No.
Just for the
Invited review: inflammation during the transition to lactation, new adventures with an old flame. You did have fire in the title. But some co-authors with you. This was published in 2015. God, time flies. 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
No.
And you still do work on inflammation. But I want to ask you a couple of questions about that.
Sure.
There are multiple tissues with inflammation postpartum, for sure. Liver, adipose, mammary, and uterus. But there's muscle. Must be inflammation. Is it across muscle as well? Muscle, or I know you're an adipose guy, or maybe you're not an adipose guy.
I do spend more time thinking about adipose than muscle. Muscle is a good question. I'm not sure I've dug into that enough.
Okay.
We've done some muscle biopsies and
Yeah.
done some transcriptomics, but not really on that question specifically.
But do you do liver? Do you only do adipose tissue? Because we're going to talk about it. Do you only do adipose tissue inflammation, or do you do liver inflammation as well?
Oh, yeah, we started really more focused on liver.
Okay.
And we've shifted to adipose focus more because of just data that we ran across that kind of made us turn that direction some. And great collaborators at Michigan State that have deep expertise in that.
Okay, and adipose tissue inflammation.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we don't normally, so liver inflammation, I think we're all sort of familiar with fatty liver and the fact that when you get fat infiltration in the liver, that ultimately creates a lot of an inflammatory environment.
For sure.
And we're probably not, we don't have enough time to go through all your science, okay? I mean, what did I say, 148 publications? And so we don't have time to do every publication. I'd love to talk about it. But so the liver inflammation, I know that we're going to talk a lot more about adipose tissue inflammation, but let's just get the liver inflammation out of the way first, okay? You ready?
I'm ready.
Just
bring it.
Just stay with me, okay? Stay with me, all right, Barry?
Wait, are we digressing or no?
No, we're not going to digress.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Choline. I know you've done a lot of work with rumen-protected choline.
Yep.
Is the target of rumen-protected choline fat infiltration in the liver, or is it some other target?
I'm not a either or type of person. I'm a both and type of person.
Oh, okay,
and
this would be interesting. Okay, yeah.
I think for sure, like Rick Grummer has some classic work that I'm 100% convinced if there's a situation that lines a cow up to have fat accumulation in the liver, choline can absolutely help limit that.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that's all it does, right? Or even necessarily the primary impact if you have a relatively healthy population of cows.
Okay.
And in fact, I used to cite in talks a nice paper out of Guelph that in one study showed that almost all the benefit of choline in terms of productivity was in the subset of cows that were overconditioned.
Okay.
And I used to say that's probably the case that's mostly where you're benefiting it. And it ticked off some people that were kind of working in that space. And so they actually paid for some studies. And Jose Santos did a really nice study to test that question.
Okay.
And basically now I'm convinced that that's not true, that there's clearly benefits for cows that are not overconditioned.
Okay. And this is choline. Are there several different companies that market a rumen-protected choline?
Yeah, there's at least 3 in the U.S. now, and globally there's maybe more than that too.
Okay.
Yep.
And my understanding always was that it has something to do with the fact that for those listeners who aren't familiar with this, the dairy cow is very good at bringing lipids into the liver, but very poor at exporting lipids from the liver, and the choline is part of that export mechanism.
Yeah, the biochemistry is super interesting. Different species use different tissues for making fats from scratch.
Yeah.
In humans, it's about half in the liver.
Yeah.
In ruminants, they don't naturally make fat triglycerides in the liver. So they're not really, at least the old story was, they're not really designed to be good at exporting those lipids because they weren't supposed to make them there.
Yeah.
But in this scenario where they're like overloaded, as a sort of an emergency mechanism, they make triglycerides. But they don't have that huge capacity to kick them back out into blood.
Now, this is a question I don't know, and you don't have to reveal. I'm sure you do some nutrition consulting with your job and stuff, but would you say what percentage of dairies in Michigan are including choline? It's usually in the transition cow diet, right? Or it's in you feed it pre-fresh.
Like 3 weeks before, and then,
Any clue? Is it popular, a little bit popular? I know
I've actually asked some of the companies that, and I guess if I had to put a bet on a number, I would say 40-50%.
Oh, pretty popular then.
Yeah.
Good penetration then in the market than the choline. So
and
people
what's
must think it
interesting
works.
To me, there's like a really nice, from Florida, there's a really nice meta-analysis a few years ago that showed basically the average study is seeing about 4 or 5 pounds of milk in the first 3 weeks of this. So it's very, and I think you can pencil it out just on that, especially if you assume some carryover benefit, which I definitely would.
Yeah.
But one of our papers from the big study we did a few years ago showed that we saw an 80% increase in colostrum yield.
Nice.
With it, which surprised me.
Yeah.
And that probably caused more uptake of choline,
at
least in Michigan, than anything else, because that's something that's so frustrating every fall to producers, is like, because it's a witch hunt. What's the reason for this? Other than seasonality, we know that's a factor, but we don't really have other good nutritional causes for that we can
Right.
point to with any data. So that's interesting.
Yeah, so the colostrum is so critical, the IgG content of that to get into calves after calving, and then different cows calve, and some produce excellent colostrum quality, which is basically a function of IgG, and some don't.
Yep.
But we don't really know why.
Yeah.
It's a total mystery. So yeah, I could believe that the choline and the colostrum was a huge deal. And this is what dairy science nutrition is all about. We in America in particular, and in large part because we do science, right? And we test stuff.
Yep.
And we don't sell snake oil. And I can tell you, if 40% of the producers in Michigan are including choline, and I'm not trying to advertise choline. I'm trying to make a point here. If it didn't work, they wouldn't put it in there because they're not going to put it in if they don't see a benefit. You know? So that.
Although I will also say, and you know this, part of the reason why research universities are so valuable is some of those things. Like if you actually want solid evidence, it's very hard to pick up on a commercial dairy, right? Because there's so many factors changing all the time, and you don't typically make the effort to do a randomized study, right?
Yeah. Cows have to be randomly assigned to a treatment, and then of course we're going to talk about facilities in Michigan State.
Sure.
And they have to be housed in the same pen, and they have to have individually fed, and they have to be randomly assigned. And you always get a little frustrated sometimes on dairies because there's confounding with the weather, with the number of fresh cows in the pen.
Yeah.
And wow, man, I just fed this stuff and I'm getting great results. I say, yeah, you just dumped 50 fresh cows in the pen. I mean, what do you expect, But on a university, we're trained, and for all you young people thinking about going into dairy science, you got to go into dairy nutrition, okay? And you write Dr. Bradford a letter, okay? And you say, I heard on Dairy Digressions you're looking for students, and so are you looking for students? Always, right?
Once in a while, yes.
Once in a while, okay. We're going to talk about niacin now, because I know your latest work, also published in Journal of Dairy Science, just so you get those rewards, is on niacin, okay? And they always say, what do you call it? RPN, rumen-protected niacin. And I know the cholin's protected as well, but we're going to talk about rumen-protected niacin. So why don't you just feed them the niacin? You just feed me the niacin. What's with the rumen protection? I don't need rumen-protected niacin.
Well, you don't have a rumen, I don't think. I mean, that'd be one reason, I guess.
What's the rumen protection all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, there was work in the early 80s feeding niacin at what we might say is almost pharmacological levels, way more than the vitamin requirement.
Yeah.
Some initial studies looked like they caused some benefits, but then later people showed that if you just take rumen bacteria or rumen fluid and put niacin in, it basically gets degraded very quickly. So we have this problem that a lot of water-soluble nutrients and even fat-soluble nutrients can be modified or degraded by the microbes. So the microbes there provide a ton of benefit. They degrade fiber, they make B vitamins, they do things like that. But if you want to do precision nutrition, they can be very frustrating for us, right? So
do they coat it with something, or how does that rumen protection go? Put it inside a tennis ball? I don't know what you guys. it's nutritionists, okay? So how do you protect it?
There's a whole boutique industry out there now, and some of these technologies are used in human frozen food applications too. But they'll take a relatively saturated fat source, and they have these fancy spray coating machines that essentially flow your nutrient into a core pellet and then surround it with a little lipid capsule, or they ingrain it in a matrix of this capsule. And the idea is because rumen microbes don't really interact with saturated fats very well, at least at a very slow rate, that can kind of flow then out of the rumen into the abomasum, and at the low pH then, and you start to get lipases coming in the duodenum, then it breaks up that matrix and frees up this water-soluble nutrient to be absorbed.
And it's vitamin B12 and niacin.
Yeah, and B3.
Oh, it's B3 or B12?
B12 is cyanocobalamin, right?
Oh gosh, what's B3?
Niacin.
Niacin. Okay, well, I think they renamed those since I was in college, or I don't remember. But the B3 is the niacin. Okay, so what in a person, what's niacin good for? Why do I need niacin, or do I need niacin?
Yeah, so if you completely lack niacin, gosh, it's been a while since I taught this. You basically end up with nerve problems, and it's a horrible condition.
Okay.
But people figured that out in the late 1800s, and that's kind of a resolved issue, and we know how to avoid it. But this renewed interest in niacin in the last 30 years came about with some discoveries that maybe 1,000 times the vitamin requirement, you start to see these interesting effects on adipose tissue.
Oh,
and
we're going back to the adipose tissue
yeah,
here.
so now instead of like all the B vitamins are necessary because they're a cofactor in some reaction.
Yeah.
But like the whole theme that I talk about in nutrition writ large in the last 30, 40 years is nutrients as signals, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
now not only are they building blocks and cofactors, they're also acting sort of like a hormone.
Yeah.
And I know that's scary to some people.
Yeah, very,
But, you know,
yeah.
they can act on cell receptors
Yeah.
to influence cell physiology, and then it opens up a whole new raft of ways that nutrients can affect an animal.
Yeah, so it's and we're going to talk about the niacin receptor because you also had a paper on that. We're also going to talk, but first we're going to talk about this first paper, randomized clinical trial in a large dairy of rumen-protected niacin, and this is a 1,000-cow trial. And you noted that you saw a massive increase, I think it was both in first and second lactation cows, 650 kilograms in the first and 675 kilograms of milk response, which is huge.
Over 305 days, not per day, just to be clear.
Yeah, but a nice bump with the niacin.
It is a nice bump, yeah.
And a nice bump with the niacin. Not too much, no, you were right, no effects on preg rates or anything like that or mastitis, but a nice bump.
Yep.
With that. And then that was by a gentleman named Kirby
Krogstad.
Krogstad.
Yep.
Yeah, you're working the guy to death. He's got all these publications in Dirty Dairy Science. The poor guy.
For the record, he worked me to death. Like
he works
any
you to
good grad
death, okay?
student does.
So he's a PhD student. I don't know if he's done yet. Is he done yet?
Yeah, he's actually, we were talking earlier about the esteemed Dr. Bill Weiss, who's now retired and freed up this position that Kirby could go take at the Worcester campus for Ohio State.
Yes. So, but I thought this was really kind of interesting. What I enjoyed about this was a paper by another person.
Yeah, Lamont Mammadova.
And okay, so now I'm going to get serious, okay, because I'm a little confused. So you were working on this HCA2 niacin receptor.
Yep.
Okay, and you're thinking here, okay, so take me through it or take us through it, but you're thinking here when you feed the extra niacin, it's actually an anti-inflammatory molecule?
That's the idea, yeah. So, like I said, there's this whole range of receptors that have been discovered since really the sequencing of genomes from different species, and they're like, well, what's this receptor doing?
Yeah.
We know it's a cell surface receptor, but we have no idea what binds to it, and they started finding, oh, it's a nutrient, it's a nutrient. And so in this case, this receptor has been shown to be activated very potently by niacin, and what's interesting is the exact same receptor responds to beta-hydroxybutyric acid, the ketone body we talk about all the time with ketosis, right? And so it's not as potent, it takes a lot more of it to do the same thing, but it has similar effects. And
so I didn't think BHB was, or I noticed you said BHBA, and we'll have to talk about that too if I'm using the right words, but let's say BHB or BHBA. According to this theory, BHB would be anti-inflammatory as well. They both would be anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
But I thought BHB was bad for cows.
well,
So, and you're going to have to answer the
I'm
question.
a both and guy.
Yeah, both and guy. So, okay, so you've got the niacin. Let's try to stay focused.
I digressed.
Okay. You're digressing on the digressor. Okay, so HCA2 is a receptor. It binds niacin, anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
BHB is anti-inflammatory. I thought BHB was an inflammatory molecule, but I must be incorrect on that.
There's actually really strong evidence, some very applied human evidence, some very mechanistic mouse and cell culture evidence, and some, you could argue how strong the evidence is in dairy cattle, but we actually did a study where we constantly infused cows with BHB for 3 days, a clamp study, and then gave them mastitis, and their ability to clear that pathogen was way, way, way worse.
Okay.
And we think it's because it turned off some of the response mechanisms driven by inflammation.
Okay, so we think about, so many people, including myself, might think about anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, aspirin. These are all anti-inflammatory molecules.
Yep.
But is niacin, if I took a whole bunch of niacin, would it have similar anti-inflammatory properties, or are we talking about a different type of inflammation and everything else?
It's not as black and white as with like NSAID drugs, okay? But I think one of the first insights into this was that this would at least interact with the immune system is when they started trials for using back up. This same receptor, actually the most abundant tissue for this receptor is adipose tissue. And the reason it's been tested in human medicine is it clearly drops blood lipids, and we now know it mostly does that by suppressing lipolysis, suppressing release of fat from adipose tissue. But when they started clinical trials, a decent number of people would get this like red skin, this flushing effect. Shortly after taking the high dose of niacin, and they ultimately found out this same receptor is very highly expressed on dendritic cells. And you kind of cause an allergic response. So the pro-anti-inflammatory thing for niacin is a little less black and white, I would say, but there is some evidence from mouse models at least that it can be anti-inflammatory in some situations.
We're going to drill a little bit more, then we're going to talk about your dairy, but we're still drilling, we're going down. I thought it increased milk production, and you're telling me it's anti-inflammatory, anti-mobilization of lipid. Don't we want cows to mobilize lipids to make milk? And you're telling me you feed them niacin, it blocks that, and they make more milk. So explain, Dr. Bradford, explain.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like, you still see these debates, and I mean, this debate has literally been going on for 70 years around, is lipolysis good or bad? Is it clearly it drives nutrients from adipose tissue that can support the mammary gland, but does that justify the potential risks that you can debate? Fatty liver, some of the complications that at least are associated with ketosis. You can argue causality, right? So it's a very difficult area of science because this cow at this time, this is all happening in the transition period. There's 50 things changing at once, right? All these endocrine changes. She went from gestation to not gestation, from not lactating to lactating. So what I was excited about niacin for almost 20 years ago is maybe this is a tool to sort of dissect some of these things and actually start asking clearer questions. If this can block this factor and everything else stays the same, now we can actually have a fair hypothesis test. Right? And that's really what got me started down that path.
I think it's a great paper, and I think it was just recently published. And what I liked about the paper is very functional. And in this paper, the team basically demonstrated, they were looking at signal transduction pathways. I think calcium was involved. And then they were demonstrating the effects of niacin on calcium, and then you were testing different receptor antagonists and demonstrating they would block that, this is fantastic, to actually get at that.
So I mean, part of our goal when we started that project was, could this eventually lead to a tool that, again, you could block the effects, because it's the same receptor, of ketone bodies at this receptor, and then again start actually having clean tests in an animal instead of in a small model to say, do ketones cause problem XYZ or not? But as you know, putting anything that's sort of a pharmaceutical agent in a whole animal and having it be as clean as you want and not toxic and stuff is very, very tricky, and there's a lot of steps there.
But you can feed. Is there commercially available rumen-protected niacin? Is that product out there?
Oh yes, for sure.
And so someone could feed niacin to their cows if they wanted to. And so that's out in the space. And there are multiple manufacturers of that?
There are, I would say today at least, almost nobody feeds just niacin. If people feed it, it's in a B vitamin mix.
Right? That's where they get the B12. We talked about how you got B3 and B12, right? And I don't know how many. Okay, you tell Don Beitz, hey, Don, I never took your biochemistry class, okay? But anyways, so we're gonna digress now.
Okay.
So where are you about on ketosis? Remember how ketosis was bad? Stop ketosis, can't have ketosis. And then all of a sudden the wave of, ketosis is just normal part of production. Barry Bradford, what's your opinion on ketosis? Tell us now for all of the dairy science world to hear.
Okay, well, I think if you have a high rate of ketosis in the first week after calving, I think that's something that should be addressed.
Good. Okay.
Okay. The week 2 data suggests that, and that's where I think that's why it's been such a debated and confusing thing, is because if you go back to the 70s, they talked about type 1 and type 2 ketosis, and then it kind of got dropped. And I think it was kind of framed badly, but that's kind of come back in vogue, and except that I think it's easier to talk about it if you diagnose a cow in week 1, there's a ton of epi data says on average, those cows are not going to do as well. They're likely to leave the herd faster. They don't make as much milk. If they're ketotic in week 2, it's probably because their mammary gland's going crazy and she's trying to keep up metabolically, and they tend to be fine.
So it's really the week 1 cows you got to worry about.
The epi data would say that. And then what I would layer on top of that mechanistically is, they used to, there are problems with just observational data, right? And so people would see these cows with ketosis, notice they weren't eating, and be like, oh, ketones probably made them stop eating. Well, that's been tested in a lot of studies now, and there's not good evidence for that. I don't think ketosis causes suppression of appetite. But we do now have, again, I mentioned it already, but we have direct evidence of impaired immune response to at least one mastitis pathogen by ketone bodies at a physiological level. We didn't go crazy. So I do think mechanistically, one negative outcome that we can strongly defend is an impairment of any infection that animal may run across. So a greater risk of running into infectious disease, I think, is a real thing.
The early ones are the ones you really got to screen for and try to get them on the treatment.
I think so.
And that sort of thing. We had Jess McCard on the podcast. Jess is the editor-in-chief of JDS Communications. She's knocking it out of the park. She's a Cornell faculty member and department chair, and she is the editor-in-chief of our journal. And she had the same comment, because a lot of those early studies were out of her lab. And then
she's made big
she mentioned on this podcast, we went back and looked at that, and if you look at it, you really see the large effect for those ketotic cows during week 1, and during week 2, it's just either not there or not as great.
I think the next step, if you find a farm with that problem, is, well, not only the treatment thing, right, but also what are some steps you can do, preventing the next round of that, which is maybe more impactful.
We're gonna move from science to sort of your other hat you're wearing, and then I think my sense is, maybe it's not true, but my sense is you have a leadership role in the development of the new dairy at Michigan State University.
It's been an exciting project.
So big project. And so a couple of quick questions. Is the other dairy still functioning, and are you carrying on research projects while the new dairy is being built?
Yes, in fact, there's probably 4 simultaneous projects going on right now, or maybe more. And we're just trying to figure out exactly how we wind down the last studies by sort of the end of June, because we have to move the herd over about a month after that.
Are you talking June 2025?
Yeah, so by the time you're listening to this, perhaps this is already done, yes.
That dairy went up fast. How long have you been building this dairy?
Yeah, I was looking back. We actually broke ground in April of 24. So the first phase, which is basically all the animal facilities and manure management and all that, is supposed to be done by the end of July of this year. So that's 14, 15 months, pretty good. And then the last phase then is to knock down the old facility, which is why we have to move quickly. And then that'll be a big silage pad for...
Okay, so the new dairy is next to the old dairy.
Next to it.
Is it across the street in that big field that's across the street, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, it's across a gravel road to the south. And the reason we had to be kind of adjacent is we've got at least a $10 million asset and an anaerobic digester next to the dairy. So that kind of constrained our options, because we want to pipe to that still.
Okay, so how many cows are you going to milk? What is the setup, and how many cows are you going to milk?
The whole facility, all the cow space, is a big tunnel ventilated facility under one big roof, 688 stalls. So we'll probably end up, some of those are like tie stalls only for research projects that need that, but we'll probably end up milking 550 to 600 cows.
Okay. Is that an expansion from your current dairy?
Yep. We currently milk about 210 most of the time.
What?
Yeah.
All that research from Michigan State nutrition
Yeah.
with 210 cows.
So we've got a herd milking 210, and we've got 153 tie stalls. So often 80 or 90% of the tie stalls are cows on one study or another.
Oh my God. I had no idea that herd was that small.
Yeah, like hotels talking about occupancy rate.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, that's the same sort of metric at Michigan State would look pretty good, I think, in terms
Probably
of...
have to share udders with Adam Locke or something, I imagine, you know.
Split udder study.
Split
I like
udders.
that.
Okay, I'll take the left side. Adam be like, yeah, I want the right side. Okay, Adam, you get what you want. Because you got to understand, there's some serious nutritionists working, all members of the American Dairy Science Association.
Yeah, that's a good team.
All big players. You've got the current president, Mike.
He prefers El Presidente.
El Presidente, Mike Vandehar.
When we walk around the hallways, yes.
Okay, yeah, he's a member, longtime member, and Dutchman. That tells you a lot right there. Oh no, there go the Dutch. Oh, here come the emails from the Dutch. And then you've got Adam Locke, who's been on this podcast.
Yep.
Personality, lots of personality there. Hey, Adam, we know
Very
about that.
productive scientist,
And
great
then,
mentor.
You and a gentleman named Zizi that I don't know. What is his full name?
Zheng Zhou,
Okay.
if I can say that right, yeah.
Okay, so he's another, I don't know him, maybe I know him.
Great guy, yeah. He did work with Juan Lord, Illinois, for his PhD.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I think he got to MSU about a year before I did, so he's been there about 6 years, doing some really cool liver metabolism stuff.
And then you got you said a research assistant professor out of Adams named Jose, can't remember his last name.
Yep, Jose dos Santos Neto.
Fantastic.
Very, very astute quantitative scientist, so he's doing a lot of meta-analysis stuff. He's trained as a nutritionist, but better at math than most of us, put it that way.
Barry, I'm going to let you rest for a second because I want to just sort of do a quick high-level overview of dairy projects that have gone around, because I want to ask you specifically about your dairy project, how you got the money together, so you start thinking about that, because dairies, university dairies, are expensive to build.
They are.
And we're not going to argue about whether that's right or wrong, but that's reality, okay? Yep. Cornell's got a fairly, maybe, 10 years old, 20 years old, Cornell's dairy, 500 cows there, tie stall, big tie stall. A really interesting model at Cornell. Cornell owns the land, the farms, and the cows, but outsources all the labor, which is an interesting model. I assume you're not going to be outsourcing labor. You're going to be having Michigan State employees then.
That's right.
At the farm. Okay.
Yep.
Texas A&M has a farm. Texas A&M System has a farm in Stevensville, 300 cow dairy, and what they do there is a producer just basically owns the cows, and I think he probably owns the labor too, and they just rotate cows through there for research purposes. Idaho's got a bigger dairy. What's with you guys, man? Idaho's got a gigantic dairy, okay? They're going to 2,500 cows.
Although it's like 5 or 7 hours from campus, which is partly
well,
why
hey, sorry, I'm just kidding. So they have a huge dairy they're putting in.
Yeah.
Amazing. And again, it was a big lift. They've got about $50 million going into that dairy. Mm-hmm. And what was so interesting about their funding, they got about $10 million from the state of Idaho, about $9 million from producers, which is good.
Yeah.
And they did this massive land swap for $23 million. So I guess they had some very valuable land that they sold, and they used, and that valuable land brought them in, and this is all approved. I've got this approved from the university. We can say this on camera or whatever we're on, and they used that, so they sold a big bunch of stuff land, and they put the dairy on less valuable land, and they were able to help fund the dairy. So it was this massive land swap, which is amazing. KSU.
Yep.
I talked to the people there. They're getting close. They almost had the money, $43 million they're trying to get for a new dairy there. They almost had it, got vetoed in the last legislative session, but they're going back at it. So KSU is close. And SDSU, South Dakota State University, they just sold their cows, but they have a commercial people using the dairy, and they hope to kind of keep it alive until they can generate the $20 million they need to rebuild that dairy. So there's a lot of different sort of models out there. This is a very expensive project. I tried to do some calculations on commercial level. So as far as I can tell, in all my calling around, usually these university dairies, you're looking at $50 to $70 million to build the university dairy.
Yep.
I tried to look at some data from Cornell Pro Dairy and try to understand, but I think you might be able to greenfield a 1,000 cow dairy if it was a commercial dairy for below $10 million. I think it's going to be somewhere south of 10 million, depending on how many bells and whistles. But the university dairies are much more expensive than commercial construction. Was that your experience?
Yeah, 100%. And I've been in so many conversations in the last 10 years trying to, well, for one, trying to get my head around it.
Yeah,
because,
right.
you know, people at the university just be like, well, that's, you know, people that don't know anything about what a commercial dairy looks like, they just kind of like, oh, well, that's because it's like built poorly. And it's like, well, that's not really true, or you don't even know that.
Yeah.
So I've really held people's feet to the fire. Like, let's actually understand the differences so I can explain it to people.
Right, yeah.
And there's at least 2 or 3 major pieces we talk about. One is a research dairy is not just a dairy, right? Like our new one at MSU is going to have classrooms. We've got visitor space. We've got all these extra things. We have $1 million system for electronically gating cows to get different diets, right? You're not going to put that in a commercial dairy.
Right.
But the other thing that does frustrate people more is commercial dairymen would say these are overbuilt, or a university contractor would say that commercial dairies are underbuilt. You can debate that, right?
Yeah,
But I've never heard of a university dairy barn roof collapsing with snow load. You hear those stories every winter, right? Yeah. So whether it's right or wrong, they do put more steel into in the supports. The concrete is done to the nth degree. Yeah. Those sort of things, and you can't really get around that if you're building on a campus. So you know that definitely adds, I would say, 20% to the budget.
Right.
So those kinds of things.
Because you guys are somewhere. You're north of 50 million, I think, on this project.
Yeah, we're going to be over 70 when it's all said and done.
When it's all said and done.
Yeah.
For the dairy.
And again, like 1 million of that is running fiber optic internet out from campus out to the dairy so that we can do our big data stuff, right? So there's a lot of things there that, you know, would never make sense on a commercial dairy, but for the sorts of things we want to do, and assuming this will have to last 40 years again, you try to future-proof things.
How did you, Barry, you're a busy guy, right? And you're not a dairy architect. I know you got a lot of talents, but this dairy architecture's not one.
Right, yeah.
Were there people that helped you with all that stuff? You got consultants coming in and telling you what you got to do? Because I wouldn't have a clue. All the hoops are too high, Barry, or whatever. How did that work? A lot of consultants?
Yeah. So in our project at Michigan State, I think in 2021, some of our leadership. Well, you know George Smith. He's our associate dean for research.
Great guy, wonderful guy, Mizzou guy, by the way.
Absolutely.
Mizzou guy.
Yeah, and you know he's really one of the main reasons this has happened. But he kind of charged me and a couple other faculty to pull together a small group of faculty to first, what would a new dairy look like and why is it necessary? Like get the big talking points. Yeah. And then we got some money to sort of sit down with an design engineer to sit there and sort of do a very high level conceptual plan and so that we could get an initial first budget on this. And then right about as we got that done is when the funding came through from the state, which was, we got $30 million.
Okay.
So we were allowed by the university to ask for half of the estimated budget, and we achieved that. And then we went in, you know, within 6 months of that coming through, we had hired a overall contractor, and then the same design engineer sort of jumped in full bore to start really doing detailed design work. So yeah, lots of external experts coming in on this.
And did the university pick up the other half of the dairy bill then? And
well, frankly, we're still looking for partners to help. You know, like
I got 20. I got 20. You want $20? I mean.
Hey, I've teased a lot of my friends that there's probably manure scrapers on the farm that could have a little name on them.
Lucy's.
We could have the Matt Lucy
right.
alley scraper.
Right. So you're still raising a little extra money to finish it up then.
So far, yes. The rest of the bill, the university's holding and hoping to find partners to help us close the gap on that.
Well, when I saw that Michigan State I was so excited by that you guys were reinvesting in dairy science.
Thanks. Yeah.
And same thing with the Idaho dairy. You know, I hope people worldwide understand that, you know, we're scientists. We need facilities to do science. Yeah. And a lot of the facilities that we use now were, you know, post-World War II type stuff. Yeah. And I mean, maybe not that old, but old. I know the Mizzou dairy, the freestyle is 30 years old, and freestyles are not made to last forever. They eventually need to be replaced, you know, and I think I think sometimes people forget that the success that we've had as a nation in food production, which leads to great stability in terms of a nation, it's hard to manage a nation if everyone's starving. Okay, bad stuff happens. The success that we've had in food production has to do with dedicated scientists in the agricultural fields, you know, and our facilities are important to our ability to make progress, you know. So I was excited by the faith that the people of Michigan and the university had, and you guys, and to build this new facility. So congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, we're super grateful.
Yes, congratulations for that. So Barry, we're going to end with a few questions here, simple questions, and any real good science career advice that you can give or you got along the way, you know. So you weren't in science, you know, something must have happened.
Yeah, I think, well, the quote I think about, you know, I've got students that I mentor, and my own kids are kind of roughly in that same age range, where it's at this point, what I really hope I can help people learn quicker than I did is this quote that I like from St. Catherine of Siena is like, if you can figure out, how's it go? If you find what you're called to do, you'll set the world on fire. And I really like it. The point is, I've had people want to get into grad school because they wanted the honor of being called a doctor, or they thought they would end up making more money. And, you know, some of that's okay. Actually, I don't think the ego thing is okay, but, you know, making a good living, I understand. But really, ultimately, if it's not something you're excited about, it's not going to last that long anyway. Yeah. You got to try to figure out what it is that you're going to enjoy day in and day out. And then, you know, like people say, if it doesn't feel like work, it's going to be easy, right? So, and I think you do your work well, right, if you're enjoying it. So I think that's the biggest thing and it's not easy necessarily to find that calling, that thing that fits you perfectly, but that should be the goal. Yeah, I'm sure, I don't know if Barry has undergraduate advisees, but I do, and I don't know if sad's the right word, but it's just, you feel bad for that kid that you can tell they haven't figured out what they enjoy doing, you know, and they tell you, well, I'm going to go into sales. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not a sales. You realize you're not a salesman, right? You know, stuff like that. Yeah. Whereas other kids have no clue they're a salesman, and they're not going into it. They want to be a scientist. No, okay. And it's true, you know, and I'm sure, Barry, you were like this. I know you discuss your early life, but I remember, I didn't grow up on a dairy, but we grew up 20 miles from the New York State Fair, and there was just something about that dairy show. We were kids from town, but of course we're from New York, so there's cows everywhere in New York. There was something about that dairy show. I don't know what it was. Yeah. Just those barns and all those cows. And they smelled so good, and they were so interesting, and they're big, and they were washing them and milking them, and I don't know, it was weird. For me, I always say I have this weird draw to complexity. It was a little different than what you're describing. Like, I think what got me interested in dairy, coming from a beef background, is the complexity of it. I'm like, I don't understand this, and I want to. But, you know. And so the last question, and this was a hard one, and we were talking about earlier, you know, if you weren't doing science, do you have anything you would be doing? You might be back at your dad's place or taking care of the cattle. You know, I go back and forth depending on the weather, right? Some days I'm like, no way I would be there. Yeah. But if, you know, I really love my job, but the one continuous complaint I have is almost always the most valuable thing I should be doing at any time is sitting on my computer, and I get really burnt out on that. So, you know, if I could pick a perfect job, it'd be about, actually the best job I ever had in my life was grad student, if you ignore the pay factor. Because it's like half working with your hands, you know, you got to go get samples, you know, you feel like you've done something with your body, and then you're using your mind in the afternoon or whatever. And so some job like that, where it was a better mix of types of work, I think would be cool. But I don't know exactly what that looks like. Some consultants, I think, kind of do that, and sometimes I'm a little jealous of what they do. It's interesting you say that, Barry, and we're gonna wrap up. But you know, grad school's changed, and everyone has changed, and people ask, I tell them, well, I loved grad school. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was down there with Thatcher, and we were doing all this cool stuff and ultrasounding cows and doing stats and hanging out in the lab and doing assays. It was a dream. Really focus, right? Yeah. Like, so you come out of undergrad and you're taking 6 or 8 classes at a time. You're juggling all those. And then now I'm juggling even more than that, right? So grad school is this great time to, like, maybe I have 2 or 3 projects I'm working on at once instead of 25. It was awesome. And you weren't managing people. No. And you had your friends and you'd hang out, and I loved it. And I always felt very lucky.
you had a great mentor. And Mike is just classic, and I had great mentors, Jeff Stevenson at Kansas, Bill Thatcher, and then Bob Collier at Monsanto, and I just, the mentors are important as well.
Absolutely.
But it was... Anything else you want to tell us about anything before we wrap this up there, Barry? You got to go to dinner soon, I know. So what's the story? Are we good?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate a chance to be on here. It's been a fun conversation.
It's been awesome. It's been fantastic.
You only had 3 digressions. I was actually kind of impressed.
I
was telling them. Yeah.
All right, everybody, that brings us to the end of this episode of Dairy Digressions. Don't forget, if you enjoyed Dairy Digressions, please like and subscribe. And if you have feedback or suggestions for speakers, please tell us at adsa@adsa.org. I'm Matt Lucy, your host. Until next time, enjoy your science. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks.